Part 4 of our NFC North Preview is brought to you by our friends at SeatGeek. Let SeatGeek take the confusion out of your ticket buying experience. Their app scans the web for the best deals to your favorite game, concert, or show and rates them on a scale from 0 to 10 to let you know if you're getting the best bang of your buck. Best bang for your buck. So instead of shopping dozens of sites to find the best deal, let SeatGeek do the work for you. Use promo code ACAA at checkout to receive $20 off your first purchase. That's 2 free beers at the stadium. I'm not going to argue with them this time. 2 free beers at the stadium on SeatGeek. So what are you waiting for? That's promo code ACAA for $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek. Life's an event. We have the tickets. Part 4 of our NFC North Preview is also brought to you by MyBookie. The NFL preseason kicks off on August 1st with the Hall of Fame game, and soon we'll have the regular season NFL and college football. Can't wait for all of that to get started. That means it's time to make an account at the best online sports book known to man. That's right. I'm talking about MyBookie. With an easy, no-hassle mobile site, 24/7 customer service, and bets on every sport and prop imaginable, MyBookie provides a fun, safe betting experience. And if you deposit today, MyBookie will give you a 50% deposit bonus. That's right. You put in $100, they'll give you $50. You put in $1,000, they'll give you $500, and it's just that easy. So go to mybookie.ag and sign up today with promo code BEARS100. At MyBookie, you play, you win, you get paid. My guest today, as always, when it comes to the Chicago Bears, from the Locked On Bears podcast and NBC Sports Chicago, Bears Wire, and everything else in between and Bears related, my good friend Lorin Cox will help us talk about this team. So without further ado, man, let's wrap up this series with the show that we've all been waiting to get to, the 2019 Chicago Bears. Let's get it. It's the 4th and final NFC North preview. It is the 14th and final opponent preview of 2019, where we bring it all back to our beloved Chicago Bears to wrap up the opponent preview series. What's going on, everybody? Larry D back for part 4 of our NFC North preview, talking about our beloved Chicago Bears. And this is the show that we've all been waiting for. Those of you who have impatiently sat through the last 13 episodes waiting for us to talk more about the Bears than just occasionally mentioning them while we discuss the Raiders, the Rams, the Saints, and so on. This is the show for you. This is a Bears podcast, and we are finally focusing on only the Chicago Bears on this episode. Our good friend Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears will be joining us here in just a few moments to break it all down for us. We try not to dwell much, if any, on 2018 or the Philadelphia game, just to kind of spare us all the pain, quite frankly. But we do dabble on it a little bit. But it's not something that we spend a good hunk of time on, not like we did when Lorin was on the show to review the 2018 season in general, fresh off that loss to the Eagles. So that won't be happening this time, but we do just little on the Philadelphia game, and mostly it's about 2019 and looking forward and talking about what this team is capable of, the potential, where it could all, lead and what could go wrong, to be honest with you. I mean, we don't talk too much doom and gloom, but we do talk a bit about, in the beginning especially, about what's with the lack of respect. Is like there are teams, pundits and experts and such that are still in love with the Rams, still in love with the Saints. Nobody's talking about a drop-off there. They still, like the Cowboys better and so on. And everyone's waiting for the Bears to fall flat on their faces. And why the disrespect? Even though we bring back the majority of the team that went 12-4 and dominated the division and dominated schedule last year, we're everyone's favorite pick to fall flat on our faces this year. Lorin and I talk about that quite a bit in the beginning before we start dissecting what is and will be the 2019 Chicago Bears. A couple of quick news and notes before we get to Lorin. Earlier today, Madden became a lot more fun of a game to play because there are only 4 players in this year's game with a 99 overall rating, and today it was announced that Khalil Mack is the third of those players. They've been announcing them one player a day for the last 3 days, and they announced the fourth and final one tomorrow, and it's been all defense so far. Aaron Donald was the first one announced. Bobby Wagner, the linebacker from the Seahawks, was number 2. Khalil Mack was announced as number 3. They will announce the fourth and final player tomorrow. Khalil Mack, the first Bear since Urlacher to get the 99 overall rating. I'm guessing that probably happened somewhere around 2005, 2006 when Urlacher was the defensive player of the year. And quite frankly, for those of you that remember, Urlacher did win the defensive player of the year in 2005. And frankly, he should have won it again in 2006. The year that we went to the Super Bowl, Urlacher was an absolute beast once again. But for some reason, it went to Jason Taylor in Miami instead of staying in Chicago with Urlacher. So, but I would guess that if you had to think of a time, because it didn't quite say in the article, but that would probably be around the time that I'd put my money on Urlacher being a 99 overall rated player in the game. The other news, Melvin Gordon, running back for the San Diego Chargers, just kind of, I don't know if it's out of nowhere, but it became big news to today, last night and into today, that Melvin Gordon wants a new contract, or he wants to be traded. Like, he is going to hold out. I'm not going to camp. He's not doing anything without a new contract for the Chargers, or trade me someplace else. And for whatever reason, Bleacher Report listed the Bears as one of about 5 or 6 teams that could be a possible landing spot for Melvin Gordon. And that's all well and good to make the trade for him. They even listed the possible compensation being one of our 2 second-round picks in the 2020 draft. Okay, so we give up a second-round pick, no big deal. Then the other problem is Melvin Gordon still wants to get paid, and I don't think that the Bears would do that. I think we're already paying guys, and we've got guys that have been on this team and that are proven for the, as a Chicago Bear, that have got paydays coming up that we're going to still have to figure out how to budget into the salary cap, like Tariq Cohen and Eddie Jackson and, Mitchell Trubisky and guys like that, to throw it in at a running back spot before we've seen a down out of David Montgomery and, Mike Davis and all that kind of stuff. You could probably combine the entire running back room we have now and still not reach what it's going to cost to keep a guy like Melvin Gordon. So it sounds like a fun idea to just add to this offense that's got a lot of exciting parts. You'll hear Lorin and I talk about that here in a few moments, but it's just not a feasible trade for the Bears. I mean, it's a doable trade, quite frankly. It is very doable, especially if it's all it will cost is a second-round pick, a very high price to pay for a running back in today's NFL. But it's nothing compared to what we'd actually have to pay him in a new contract to keep him beyond 2019, and it's just not worth it, quite frankly. Other teams listed, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Buffalo Bills, the Green Bay Packers, so let's hope that doesn't happen. The last thing we need is Melvin Gordon terrorizing us for the next 5 or 6 years, twice a year, wearing a Green Bay uniform. Maybe a taste of our own medicine, considering that Green Bay possibly had a chance to pull the trigger on Khalil Mack and ended up having him go to the Bears and terrorizing them for the next 5 or 6 years. But, I would prefer that didn't happen. Buffalo, Chicago, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and then there were 1 or 2 other ones in there that I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was interesting to see the Bears in there, and 1 second-round pick doesn't seem like a bad price tag, and maybe a little steep, quite frankly, but we wouldn't be able to keep him beyond this year. We'd be paying a second, kind of like the Eagles paid a third-round pick to rent Golden Tate for the last half of the season. He signed with the Giants in the offseason. It wouldn't be worth it to give up a second-round pick just to hang on to Melvin Gordon for 1 season, to have him rush off into free agency next year. So no, I don't like that scenario. So we'll let Gordon figure it out, and maybe the Chargers will come to their senses and give the guy a contract and keep him happy and on the team, or they'll trade him somewhere that is anywhere but Green Bay. Quite frankly, that would be nice. So, but anyway, those are the quick news and notes that I had for today. Got lots to cover with Lorin, so we're going to go ahead and get into that. But real quick, before I do go, I did want to mention that we are locked in with Adam Rank. I'm going to be talking to him on Monday night. That episode will drop first thing on Tuesday morning. That episode will be available. When I was talking to Adam today, lining up the times and how we're going to get the interview set up and whatnot, I asked him for the information on the show that he's going to be doing on the 21st in Chicago for this little tour that he's doing. He's going across, going all over to different places in the country to do this. And so I asked him for the info, and here it is right here. I'm pulling it up right now. It is the Adam Rank's Fantasy Meets Reality Tour, and it's going to be at the Beat Kitchen on 2100 West Belmont in Chicago on Sunday, July the 21st. Doors open at 8. Show starts at 9. It's a 21 and over show, just in case that applies to anyone. You can go to the beatkitchen.com and click on events to find out to get how to get your hands on tickets. It's Adam Rank with special guest Greg Romero Wilson, and they'll be doing a kind of like hybrid comedy / fantasy football Q&A type of show. To get more details on the show, we'll discuss that for sure when Adam comes on the show. We'll talk about what you guys could be seeing if you're interested and everything. But if you want to get a line on tickets, it's beatkitchen.com for Adam Rank's Fantasy Meets Reality Tour, Sunday, July 21st at the Beat Kitchen. So there you go. There's the info for the show itself. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend. I have to work Monday morning, and I live 4.5 hours away from Chicago. So it's just not in the books for me to be able to go. But I hope you go and you have a great time, and tell them that I sent you. So there you have it. So there we go. There you go. We got the Adam Rank Fantasy Meets Reality Tour, Sunday, July 21st at the Beat Kitchen in Chicago. So enjoy that. And there you go. There's our news and notes. We're going to go ahead and bring on our good friend Lorin Cox to help us break down, dissect, dive into our beloved Chicago Bears, the 2019 Chicago Bears. This is the team that I've been looking forward to since even before 2018 started, before all of the wonder that was the 2018 Bears. This was the team that I had circled. This was the one that I wanted to see. Lorin and I break it down and look at what could be, what we think will be, and what we hope can be in 2019. And here we are. This is the finale, the 14th and final, saving the best for last with our beloved Chicago Bears. And as always, to join me and talk about our beloved from the Locked On Bears podcast and NBC Chicago and A Partridge in a Pear Tree, we got our good friend Lorin Cox. Welcome back to the show, man.
It's the true mark of we're getting down to the end of the summer when we get this Bear season preview. So I am 100% ready for it. Appreciate you having me back.
Amen, man. Amen. So we were talking briefly before we got started here that it's already almost training camp, and yet it still feels so far away all at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of been a weird summer and even just sort of end of the offseason, post draft from a Bears perspective, as far as like, we had rookie minicamp, and then we jumped into minicamps and OTAs, and then we had like the Bears 100 celebration, and it seemed like Bears stuff kind of lingered even after, the players were done practicing, and it wasn't until just like really like last week or so that we've kind of hit this true dead of like, okay, nothing Bears related has actually happened in a couple weeks. So it was going by, but but now we're kind of at that stopping point. Everything kind of just slowed back down.
Yeah, it's slowed down to a snail's pace at this point. Did you get to go to the celebration?
No, I did not, but I saw a lot of the videos and, live streams and the panels and the jerseys, of course, all that cool stuff.
Yes. So what did you think of the uniform? Let's talk about that real quick.
I don't have like a super strong opinion. I'm not crazy about it, but I don't hate it either. I mean, it's fine. There've been some really bad throwbacks from other teams,
Sure.
and it's just not in that category at all. But I didn't see it and was like, oh wow, this is so cool. I need to get one of those. It was just like, okay, it's a throwback to the 40s, and that's neat or whatever. But okay.
So it was 36, I think, is the team that it's modeled after. Yeah. So I mean, when I saw it, as I'm sure I've told you before, I am the self-professed uniform snob. These kinds of things really affect me emotionally at times, and like the fact that we're going to be wearing those god-awful orange jerseys a few times this year. I'm not looking forward to that at all. But it struck me in different ways, because it's like the helmet, initially not crazy about it, but like you said, I didn't hate it. I can handle it. It's from 36, so that's not too much of not a big leap to like, okay, they wore something that looked like that. The jersey, honestly, I really liked the jersey. Knee-jerk reaction, first time I saw it, I liked the jersey. The stripes on the shoulders, the blocky, like varsity-type numbers, those were cool. Can't go wrong with the all-solid navy blue pants. And then I come to a screeching halt when we go from the knees down and those god-awful, like Pippi Longstocking socks that they're wearing. They're just atrocious. And it just, everything stops there for me. I can't get past the socks. Like, everything stops there.
Yeah, it calls back to the Pittsburgh Steelers bumblebee
yes
look on those socks. I'm not crazy about it. And even like the helmet, for some reason, it gives me that like Michigan Wolverine / Delaware Blue Hands. Shout out to Matt Nagy. I mean, that kind of a vibe that, I don't know, it doesn't scream Bears to me, I guess.
Well, here was the other thing that kind of grabbed me was when I saw it, I saw the pictures, and it looked one way in pictures, and then when I saw like the promo video of Kyle Fuller and Tariq Cohen posing in the uniform, it looked different. Like the orange didn't pop as much in the video as it did in the photographs. Like, if it was a softer orange closer to what the Bears actually wear, then it didn't look as horrifying as it did in those photographs where apparently like they photoshopped and tweaked some of the colors to kind of make it pop a little bit more. So I'm actually going to reserve my 100% final judgment until I actually see the uniform on television, because video shows me one thing, photos show me others, is something else. And so I'm kind of holding off on it. I still hate the socks, no matter what kind of orange I'm looking at. The uniform itself, I don't have a problem with. From the knees up, I'm good. The pants, yes. The jersey, like the jersey a lot. The helmet is a hit or miss thing for me. Like, okay, fine, I guess. But the socks, that's where it all falls apart for me.
And I just come back to, as much as the socks are bad, I think we can walk away feeling okay. If that's the worst part,
yeah,
we can live. The jerseys are white, they're slick. I think when it's the jersey itself, I think is the biggest thing of like, because it's so big, it's so noticeable. It's what your eyes are drawn to. The pants a little bit after that, but the socks end up at the bottom, and then the helmet. The jerseys themselves are solid when you talk about what you would buy at the store. So that's important.
Right, indeed. So yeah, we just spent 5 minutes talking about a jersey. So there we go. But speaking of that 100-year celebration, somebody brought a horrifying thought online on Twitter about, can you imagine if, God forbid, the 100-year celebration fell 2 years ago when John Fox was still a coach? We're coming off a 3-13 season, and we're trying to get the fan base excited about the 100th year of Bears football with John Fox and Dole Loggins calling the shots.
Yeah, it worked out so well, right, for this to actually.
It really did. It really, really did.
Is there a coach in Bears history that would have been any more fitting for? I mean, the way that Nagy engages with his players and even with the fan base and the community, and just endearing himself, and both that young energy as well. I mean, other coaches haven't been boring old men like John Fox that don't have a lot of energy, but there's just something extra in a good way about Matt Nagy, something above and beyond in that regard. That, and even if I look across the NFL, I mean, which coach would I love to have a 100-year celebration with? I mean, there's some other ones I'm sure across the league, but Matt Nagy's definitely near the top of that list.
Absolutely, yeah. And it, like you said, it was kind of a perfect storm for it all to kind of come down the way that it did. The team that the Bears and the season that they were able to put together last season. So people are very excited about this 100th season, not even really because it is the 100th season, just because this is a year where people think the Bears are really going, well, actually, depends on who you talk to. So we'll talk about that as we go along here. But, there's a lot of people, pundits, experts, whatever you want to call them, that think that this is a team that is ripe for regression, and another team that, like a la Louis Riddick, who's a huge fan of the team, thinks that they are a Super Bowl contender right here, right now, without having seen how some of these new parts are going to work.
Yeah, that variety, I think, is what at least maybe keeps things a little bit more interesting. It's you're never going to have everybody all in on the team being good, and it's easy for people to kind of jump in and try and say things are going to be bad, but it keeps things interesting, and at least maybe I don't want to say like it's not always a good thing to allow too many other viewpoints if they're not educated, but you are at least kind of getting somewhat of a balance that, okay, maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle, or where exactly that middle is. Right. It's hard to tell.
And without talking about the actual reasons that some of these people name, overall, what do you think it is that, like, just historically, the Bears never get a lot of credit when they've had, I mean, outside of the teams that they had in the 80s, anytime the Bears show any kind of success, nobody really believes that it's going to be, that they're going to double down on the success and be successful again. It's like every year they're kind of setting themselves up, the detractors, if you will, to be disappointed or whatever, or gearing up to be the I told you so group. The Bears are one of those teams that those people can't really wait to be right or wrong about. And why do you think that is? Like, the Bears can never really get to see, like the Rams, people are still in love with the Rams. They think it's going great, even though they lost a bunch of people in the offseason. No one's doubting what's going to happen with the Rams, but the Bears have one good season. We have 99% of that roster still in place, and yet people are tripping over themselves to call the Bears the team that's going to disappoint in 2019.
Yeah, I think some of that is just sort of recent history, and not just the 4 straight fourth-place finishes in the NFC North, but like even when the Bears have had their spikes of good play, or at least spikes of hype even, they have that big 2010 season where, Jay Cutler and the whole NFC North championship game, but then they followed it up with kind of an 8-8 year, and Jay Cutler gets hurt, and yada yada, and then they come back, and even in 2012 with Lovie Smith, and they go 10-6 but miss the playoffs. I mean, they've got these ups and downs. Even before that, the big 2001 season, and then they come back in 2002 and just totally flop after that. I mean, there have been years, especially during the Jay Cutler era, where it was kind of easy to get excited about the team, and they were never able to consistently win at a sustained level, for multiple seasons. Whereas the Rams have had 2 seasons of success, at least with that specific example. And a lot of the other teams that don't get as much doubt have had at least a little bit more of a track record of, I guess, franchise stability, for lack of a better word there, of being able to put together some more consistency from season to season and not have so much of the ups and downs. And the Bears are just kind of in a point where it's okay, you have the up, and people are kind of waiting to see, I think nationally, let's, prove it, show that this isn't just a flash in the pan like we've seen sometimes out of Bears teams of years past.
Yeah, I just think that this team in particular, I feel is way more loaded than those other teams in the past. It's almost reminiscent of the Cubs. You're a Cubs fan, right?
I'm not so much.
Or does your Wisconsin blood, are you a Brewers guy? What's going on there?
So, like, I'm not a huge baseball guy, but my allegiances do lie with Milwaukee.
I see. Okay. Well, anyway, the Cubs have always been one of those teams where they've always had some nice pieces in place. They've always had a talented guy. Every once in a while, they'll put a year together, and then the next year, almost inevitably, they'll be a disastrously bad team. So I guess that's kind of what we're looking at with the Bears. Like you mentioned, 2001, 13-3. Home field in the playoffs, and or whatever, and then we lose that game to Philly, and then 2002 with 16 road games essentially because they tore down Soldier Field to rebuild it kind of thing, but 4-12 in 2002. 2010 we fall flat in 2011 after the Cutler injury, and then 2012 happens, and so on and so forth. So I definitely see where you're coming from there. That people are looking for the waiting for the consistency to kick in. But I like the team that we have too much to see all the negativity that the Bears have been getting.
Yeah, and like even you kind of the negativity perhaps doesn't have a ton of actual concrete justification
right.
To stay in the offseason. But you even think back to some of those Bears teams that we were talking about there as to the reasons why they weren't as successful the next year. I mean, even after like the Super Bowl season, a lot of those it's like they have a big season and then the next year for whatever reason injuries seem to be the issue. And it's not that the team all the same players came back and just played worse, but the situation that the team went through, Jay Cutler gets hurt that year, or the year after the Super Bowl, they kind of rotated between Rex Grossman and Brian Griese and Kyle Orton, and there were a lot of other factors. It wasn't just like picking up exactly where you left off the season before, but other things started to go wrong. So it's not necessarily that they disappointed or more so that they just kind of didn't have the opportunities that they did the previous year to be successful, and that could very well be the case for the two. I mean, you never know what could happen in 2019 where somebody gets hurt or things just go wrong for some way they can't control, and then all of a sudden the people who were negative about it were right, but they weren't right that the team regressed. They just they would just be right that things went poorly. It's not always as simple as the team just is worse the next year. A lot of times there can be different factors that play into that's just totally out of your control.
Yeah, I guess just as a fan, you just kind of wonder where the hostility comes from. Sometimes it really does seem like some people out there can't wait for the Bears to fail this year, so they can say they were the ones that said back in February that this is the way the year was going to go down before move number one in free agency or anything like that was even made. So,
well, and you get some people that are, I don't want to. I'm not even thinking of anybody in particular. Like I'm not trying to talk around an individual or anything, but I'm sure there are people out there that, like, for example, if you were low on Mitchell Trubisky in the draft, you look better if Mitchell Trubisky struggles and, has a bad season, then your evaluation of him in the draft looks better. So you might be a little bit more negative in that way, trying to sort of project that forward. Or if you didn't think Matt Nagy would be a good head coach candidate because of his inexperience at Kansas City, which I will admit I wasn't. I had my concerns. I'll just say.
So did I.
You did too.
Yeah.
So to kind of justify the way someone previously felt about whatever player it is on the Bears, or multiple players or coaches, or however they evaluated certain things with this team, you can have some incentive there to say, oh well, this team's not going to be very good, in order to sort of justify a football analyst's previous analysis.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it before. I think I have brought it up with you. Like, what did the Bears or the city of Chicago or whatever do to Jason La Canfora? Like, that guy hates everything Chicago Bear related. He thinks Mitchell Trubisky is the Antichrist, and he's one of the main ones that's like the Bears are ripe for regression. Like, the 2019 is going to be a disaster for them. But everything that he always says about it's never positive. He never has anything positive to say about this. Like, it's just full on like rage that he has towards the team, because he's never given him credit for anything or anything like that. He's always been very hateful towards Chicago.
Yeah, and I think you used to see this even sometimes with some like even local media members that that cover the team. I think more in years past. I think the guys that they have now, for the most part, across the beat writers are fairly avoid this. But a guy like Jason La Canfora might be negative on the Bears because, say, they don't supply him with information when
True.
he asks,
Yeah.
or Ryan Pace doesn't answer his phone calls, or even players that he's tried to interview have given him poor interviews, or X, Y, Z. Sometimes you'll see that even with the beat writers. Like I said, like if when Jay Cutler gives you a bad interview, maybe all of a sudden your coverage of Jay Cutler gets a little bit more negative. And same with head coaches. If you feel like they're not giving you the interview or the information or whatever, sometimes you can see that kind of turned around and reflected in their analysis and their coverage of the team. So, you never know some of the back channels for some of the national pundits. It works the other way too, that I'm sure Louis Riddick probably has some friends in the organization. Maybe he knows Matt Nagy going back to days at the Eagles or whatever. And so not that that totally unjustifies his opinion, but maybe it's easier for him to have more of a confident, positive opinion about the team. So it does go both ways. But I suspect with Jason La Canfora, the Bears are a team that have not cooperated with his desire to be an insider, quote unquote.
Like I said, I have no doubt that very well could be the case, because there has to be something. There does, because there's just, with what the Bears did last year and the progress that Trubisky did made despite the struggles that he was leaps and bounds better than he was at the end of the 2017 season. There was no credit for any progress that he'd made, no progress for anything that the Bears did, the moves that they made, the team that Ryan Pace put together, nothing. So I have no doubt there was some kind of bad interaction, whether it was something that happened with Ryan Pace or maybe it was a John Fox thing that he still got bad blood about, or whatever the case. Something happened, and La Canfora's got it all for the Bears.
And some of those things can linger through multiple, eras and administrations and regimes of maybe Jerry Angelo screwed over Jason La Canfora and gave him bad information. It's okay, from now on, no matter who they hire, I'm not gonna like that. Stuff like some of those guys can hold grudges for a long time.
Yeah, like I said, I have no doubt there has to be something, because with logic there, it doesn't make sense for him to come out against the Bears the way he does. There has to be something there. So maybe you can do a little investigative report on that and get back to me at some point during the season. How's that sound?
I'll check with my #sources.
There you go. So looking forward in 2019, we're not going to talk about 2018. We talked that to death when we talked about a week or so after the doink that ended one of the most promising seasons I've ever witnessed. And so we look into, first of all, we talked about losing Vic Fangio, and he's off to Denver. I believe when we talked, we talked briefly about Pagano being hired as the defensive coordinator of the team, and basically he's going to be picking up where they left off. And a lot of people are very concerned about the transition from Fangio to Pagano, and it's legitimate concern, but I don't think it's anything to be overly worried about. But that was one of the more significant things that happened, because free agency for the most part for the Bears was about maintenance so much than overhauling the team, which hasn't been the case for a while.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a, there's some continuity, but at the same time the transitional period here is, it's still a factor. I mean, it's kind of one of these weird, I don't know how often you see this where a team brings back so many of the starters and a new coach is just supposed to come in and kind of just be the old coach, in the same way that a new player is supposed to come in and kind of just fill the role of the previous player. But now, you don't want Chuck Pagano to change everything, but you don't want him to not tweak anything. And it's
right.
I don't envy him necessarily coming into this situation with the expectations that'll be as high as they will be for Chuck Pagano. But he's been through a lot worse, I suppose. So I'm pulling for him.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he's going to be capable of. I mean, his predecessor has got a similar situation in Denver, where that's a defense that's ready to hit the ground running. I mean, you got even better edge rushers than the Bears have in Chicago. I mean, he's got Von Miller on one side, Bradley Chubb on the other. I mean, granted, he had Khalil Mack, but we had adequate people on the other side of Khalil Mack, but he's got Von Miller and then Von Miller Jr. out there in Denver, so they're going to be expected to be animals like they were in Chicago in Denver. So he's going to have a heavy weight to carry out there as well if that defense is in a top 5 unit, because he came into town.
Yeah, he got screwed over with the whole quarterback situation.
He did.
For Vic. If he could have gone there and they could have drafted, whatever kind of top quarterback in the draft, and you buy yourself some time there. But the whole trying to rely on Flacco, and makes you wonder how much of that was Vic Fangio's choice versus John Elway kind of doing his thing. So I feel for Vic, but I hope he can continue to live out his dream as a head coach.
Yeah, agreed. So looking at free agency for the Bears, like I said, we did have some holes to fill. Adrian Amos and Bryce Callahan did leave. We didn't keep either of them. There was always talk throughout the season and before the free agency period started that we'd keep at least one of them, and that didn't happen. Bryce Callahan goes to Denver. He follows Fangio out there. Adrian Amos stays close to home with Green Bay. Not a big fan of that move, but their replacements, at least for the time being, Buster Skrine signed away from the New York Jets to be our new nickel, and Clinton Dix rejoins Eddie Jackson, his college teammate, in the backfield to hopefully rejuvenate his career.
Yeah, and that was, I think, so key to the transition from a secondary standpoint of like I'm not a huge fan of Buster Skrine and as a slot replacement for Bryce Callahan. I think we're going to see a drop off there, but to be able to replace Amos with somebody like Clinton Dix, especially at the investment or lack thereof,
right?
That's such a, I don't want to say like salvage is a strong word, but as far as like trying to maintain as much as you can in the consistency, that was such a critical piece to being able to still have such a high level of performance there. Because if you had to replace, if you're rocking Deion Bush, you couldn't get anybody and Buster Skrine. I mean, you're starting to add a couple more potential concern areas here, but I don't think there are too many Bears fans that are concerned about Clinton Dix. He's not going to be. He's a different type of player than Adrian Amos, but in terms of the quality of the football player you're getting, not too many people upset about that one.
Right, and I think that much like the 2018 team where they found success with intangibles more so than anything. Like, I think you and I both agreed that we thought the Bears would be better last year with the influx of talent on the offensive side, and then obviously the last-second trade for Khalil Mack. But I don't think you and I thought that it would translate into as many wins as it became, and that was due to the effect Matt Nagy had on the team and the culture that he brought to Chicago. How will that culture infect a guy like Clinton Dix, who's already excited about being in Chicago, has acknowledged to people that he took less money to come here and be a part or have a chance to be a part of this and go forward from there? Maybe that and the fact that he's on a 1-year prove-it deal, sky could be the limit with Clinton Dix.
Yeah, that's all what makes it such a valuable and critical signing, I think, to the health and the consistency of the secondary, and in turn, like the rest of the defense. I mean, a guy like this that we've seen play at a Pro Bowl level before, and maybe he wasn't. Well, he wasn't at that level, his last season in Green Bay and Washington. Although I think he got a little bit almost underrated through that part. But to be able to you see the potential there, and to be able to get something like that, with sort of the perfect mix to move him into Chicago. I mean, like you said, the Eddie Jackson connection and the culture here, and then the prove it deal, and just sort of everything in the right time in the right place.
Yeah.
Specifically for Clinton Dix. There was no other free agent safety that would be able to kind of check all of those boxes and provide everything that the Bears would need in that regard to be able to be that valuable at that low of a contract. I mean, it really was sort of the perfect storm just to kind of get that move into this secondary and try and keep things flowing from where they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, and to get him for literally 25% of what other safeties were going for on the market this year. I mean, Amos was even on the lighter side, and he got $9 million a season from Green Bay. When you're talking about guys like the Honey Badger signing with the Chiefs, or Earl Thomas got a big deal from Baltimore. The safeties are getting $14 million a season. We got Clinton Dix for $3.5 million. So I'll take that. And taking a shot on a guy without having to bet the farm on him, I'll take that shot.
And that's just what comes with not only the culture but the winning too. I mean, it's not only how people act in the locker room and respect each other and stuff, but being a successful winning team that goes to the playoffs and wins the NFC North and has the number one defense. That's what affords the Bears this opportunity that I don't think we would have seen them be able to make a move quite like that under John Fox.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy. So looking at the other additions, the influx of new guys, I mean, because we re-signed a bunch. We got Aaron Lynch to come back. Pat O'Donnell was re-signed. Bobby Massey signed to an extension before free agency got started. And Ben Broniker all coming back. The new guys, we signed Marvin Hall on a 1-year deal. He's more of a speedster, kick return kind of guy from Atlanta. Mike Davis, the running back that from Seattle, he signed on a 2-year deal. Ted Larson is a returning guy. We had him for a bit. Now we brought him back to help with our O-line depth. And then the person I'm most – I don't know if I'm excited or just intrigued about Cordero Patterson and what he brings to the table. Just because, the guy has literally done everything on the offensive side. I think maybe even thrown a pass or two. I was going to say done everything but play quarterback, but I think he's thrown the ball a few times. He's been lined up as a running back. He's been a receiver, and he's been to a Pro Bowl as a kick returner. So what can Matt Nagy do with a guy like that? I can't wait to see.
Yeah, a lot of these offensive pieces, and even when you get to the draft picks in a little bit, they're all just sort of fun fits for Matt Nagy's offense. And, a guy like Cordero Patterson, like you said, can line up everywhere, run the ball, catch the ball, and add that sort of that balance to Tariq Cohen. Like when Tariq Cohen's on the field, you really have to keep an eye on him, and you can kind of follow him around and try and dedicate somebody to him. But then when you had a second, not that Patterson is exactly the same, but in terms of to be used, a second Tariq Cohen that can motion the same way and play the same spots in the offense, I don't know how you're supposed to get a handle on both of those guys on the field. And even somebody like Mike Davis, who can be an all-around back out of the backfield, great pass protector. I think he's an underrated receiver. Wasn't used like that a ton in Seattle, but I think he can do a pretty solid job there. And of course, run the ball as well. And you throw David Montgomery in that conversation. That's we'll save that a little bit. But there's a lot of guys now that can do a lot of different things in this offense. It's not just line up Allen Robinson on the outside and line up Adam Shaheen at inline tight end, and that's where they're going to line up, and they're going to be they're going to do that to the level that they can. But you're not going to be surprised by what Allen Robinson does on the field. You know what he's going to do, and he's going to do it at a high level, and that's great. But to be able to exploit more of that creativity and get guys that have more versatility, it really just makes the season that much more exciting. And I can't imagine what Matt Nagy has going through his head all off season.
Yeah, the only thing that kind of bums me out is that we're almost certain that we're going to have to wait until September 5th to see it if Matt Nagy treats the preseason this year like he did last year. We're not going to see any of this in the preseason, maybe a drive or two like the second game of the preseason. But other than that, those guys are going to be in street clothes on the sidelines watching the other guys try to make the team.
Yeah, I would expect it to almost be worse than last year because at least last year the guys still had to learn the offense. So I would have thought they would have played them more last year. But now that almost everybody on this team knows the full offense and the defense, they have even less incentive to want to play them. So in theory, they might play even less than we saw last year. I hope not, but I fear for it.
It's oh God, thanks. I wasn't looking forward to the preseason, and you just made it worse for me. Thank you so much. But
for it by the time we get there.
Absolutely, it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it on September 5th. So speaking of September 5th, we already talked about Green Bay and Adrian Amos. That's where he's headed. Bryce Callahan, like you said, kind of followed Fangio, which was kind of a switcheroo there because everyone was kind of thinking that Amos would follow Fangio to Denver, not Bryce Callahan, but it went down the way it did. Other big names that we lost, maybe not so big names, but we're Bear fans, so these guys are all names to us. Benny Cunningham ends his tenure in Chicago, goes to Jacksonville. Brian Witzman and Eric Kush both signed with the Browns, so be adding depth to Baker Mayfield and company, as opposed to Mitch and our guys here in town. Daniel Brown and Josh Bellamy signed with the Jets. Kevin White, God bless him, found a new home in Arizona. He's on a one-year prove-it deal out there. And then Michael Burton, who I was not sad to see go, signed a deal with the Saints. And then, of course, we cut Cody Parkey. Sam Acho was a salary cap casualty, which is unfortunate. And Deion Sims, which pretty much useless his entire time in Chicago, was also let go. So, and then, of course, the big one that I'm forgetting or haven't mentioned yet, Jordan Howard traded away to the Eagles for a conditional draft pick that could be a fifth rounder, which is what we gave up to draft him in the first place.
Yeah, and as much as that was a fairly decently long list of names, right? You don't still feel like there's much of a drop off. I mean, in terms of just on paper pure talent. I mean, right. The defense didn't really. I mean, they replaced, but they didn't necessarily add anything super notably consistent. But offensively, you dropped off a lot of guys there. But when you replace them with all the guys we were talking about before, plus all the rookies, not really much of a drop off there. And I wonder. You mentioned Sam Acho, and I had kind of forgotten about that whole thing. And he's still sitting at a free agent, and the Bears have cap space. I wonder if they could bring him back at some point, if on a 1 year cheaper deal than he was before, and have another body at the outside linebacker position. You can never have too many of those.
Right. As far as the guys that we did lose, oddly, one of the people that ranks highest on the list as far as sad to see him go is Josh Bellamy. I didn't think that I would feel that way. I didn't think I would be disappointed to see Bellamy go because there was such a 2016. I was not the biggest fan of Josh Bellamy dropping the touchdown pass against Tennessee that would have won the game when he jumped up in the air to catch it for no reason. And it hit him in the chest and fell down, and the guy couldn't catch a cold in Siberia if he was butt naked. And, but in 2017, he was a bit better. And then 2018, he was such a utility guy for Nagy and even scored a touchdown or two. I was disappointed to see him go. And then Witzman, I was kind of hoping that we would hang on to him for the O-line depth and everything. I think those are like my top two as far as guys that we saw go. Jordan Howard obviously ranks up there, but that was kind of an inevitable thing. So that's why that one didn't hurt as much. But I was kind of hoping we could hang on to Witzman, kind of hoping that we could bring Bellamy back. But if we lose Josh Bellamy, but we get Cordero Patterson, I'll take that trade.
Yeah, and Riley Ridley and Marvin Hall.
Right.
And Emmanuel Hall. Yeah, they did a pretty well. I mean, I agree with you about the offensive line, too. I was a bigger Eric Kush fan than I think a lot of people, and you have a guy that can start at guard or center, and maybe he's not going to be a top starting player at those positions, but be that valuable, versatile depth. I'm not crazy about the offensive line depth outside of Ted Larson at this point, so I would have thought they could prioritize that, but otherwise, not really missing too much anywhere on this roster besides kicker.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a Kush guy. I liked him a whole lot. It's just that what really kind of bugged me about, or maybe it wasn't so much bugged me, but or confused me, confounded me, whatever you want to call it, was that, obviously we knew that once Daniels got the spot, it was his to keep. And but those, like that time that when Kyle Long went down, we signed Witzman off the street, and then he's automatically plugged in, as opposed to Eric Kush taking the right guard spot while Long was out. That part I couldn't quite get. Like I don't think it's so important to make sure that they stay on one side of the line or the other. And Kush couldn't find his way back out on the field when he knows the offense. He's there. He knows the team, the system, the calls, whatever. But the guy that we pulled off the street is the one that's playing instead of him. That's where I kind of put a little bit more weight with Witzman than I would with Kush as far as bringing him back.
Yeah, I was always kind of confused about that. I was confused from the start when they did the rotation with James Daniels and Eric Kush. Conventional wisdom always kind of says stick your five guys in there and let them just build some of that continuity. So it was always just like a little bit of a head scratcher there, but it worked out. At the end of the day, the offensive line is solid. They got their starting five in there. So whether it was the perfect plan or not, the results are so satisfactory. So
far, yeah, so far. So we go into draft night, and first 2 days were very uneventful. Well, at least until we got to the tail end of day 2, because we had to wait for the Bears until 87. Thankfully, they were able to maneuver a bit, or felt compelled to, at least, that a running backs was going to begin. And it looks like they were right, because what's his name from Memphis went to the Rams, Darrell Henderson.
Yes, Darrell
Henderson, and he goes to the Rams. But I really didn't. I wasn't keen on him because it looked like we already have a Tariq Cohen. We don't need to add another one. I mean, obviously, I don't think you could have too many Tariq Cohens, but we got a guy that does that already. We don't need him. And then David Montgomery was a guy that had been talked about a lot. He'd been kind of slated to the Bears for a majority of the offseason, a possibility. Everyone was pretty certain that running back was going to be a top priority in the draft, even with us picking in the late 80s in the third round. And the Bears move up to 73 and get their hands on Montgomery from Iowa State. And even though we didn't pick until 73, it seems like we still got a top pick in this year's draft.
Yeah, and really too when you bring in Riley Ridley. I mean, not top.
Oh man,
Ridley.
Yeah.
When you talk about being able to extract as much value as you can from the draft picks, getting a guy like David Montgomery, that's good value for the running back position. As much as Twitter debates how valuable the position is and whether or not you should use a first round pick on whenever, third round kind of feels like that point where even the most staunch anti-running back analysts out there, third round is when you say, okay, this is the most reasonable time to start really getting a good running back. And then to be able to get somebody like Riley Ridley in the fourth round, not to jump ahead too much here, but a route runner like this who can really kind of plug and play in the offense right away as outside of the top 100 picks in the draft, sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, tremendous value for Riley Ridley because in mock drafts and all that kind of stuff, this is a guy that was supposed to come off the board before David Montgomery, not still be there 50-plus picks later for the Bears for him to fall into the Bears' lap. The Bears didn't have to trade up or trade down to get Riley Ridley. 126 was their next pick, and boom, there he was, and he was our guy. It's like, we don't really need another wide receiver, but why wouldn't we take this guy in this spot?
Yeah, and it was tough because it's like, as much as you wanted to invest maybe in another young safety to eventually take over, or maybe another young cornerback. I mean, there were other positions of quote unquote need that maybe you look at the draft board and okay, maybe you could have taken him or you could have taken that, but you got to stick to best player available when you're in a position like this with this team, and you're already kind of in this process of churning over and having your young guys rise up and start to take bigger positions. You can never have too many wide receivers, and given the injury history of Allen Robinson and even Taylor Gabriel to some extent, not too bad to overload at that position and let Matt Nagy figure out how to get them all the ball.
Exactly. And then in the sixth round, a guy that didn't really blow anybody's hair back when he came off the board, but somebody who, and we'll talk more about OTAs here in a second, but somebody who's been really impressing, like beat writers and such that were allowed to watch the OTA practices, was Duke Shelley, the corner from Kansas State. I mean, there's rumors right now that he might win the nickel job from Buster Skrine.
Yeah, and that would be, incredible. And I would guess, as training camp gets going, and the Bears aren't going to want to rush him into that, but it's always encouraging. I mean, how many 6th-round picks can you think of in recent years that jump out that quickly? I mean, guys like Bilal Nichols, it's a little bit more into the season when we start to see some of those flashes, but to be able to kind of plug and play, it shows you he's more football player than just athlete. I mean, he's not an unimpressive athlete, don't get me wrong, but you can tell when a guy can just kind of jump in and ball, there's something natural about that really stands out above, the other young guys that are plugging in there and just trying to catch up.
Yeah, and our 2 7th-rounders, Kareth White Jr., running back out of Florida Atlantic, according to his coach. His name is right on the tip of my tongue. What's his name? God, I hate it when I do this. Kiffin. Lane Kiffin was the head coach at Florida Atlantic. The Bears got a steal at 222 with Kareth White, and then rounding it out, Steven Denmark, a corner from Valdosta State, who, after I saw his measurables, his height, his weight, I was not surprised to find out that the 6'2", 230-pound guy used to be a wide receiver. So he's got a big, long, lanky frame, but switched to corner, did well enough to get himself drafted. So I think out of all these guys, he's probably the biggest project in those 5 players. But I was really impressed with what Ryan Pace did with those 5 picks. A less is more kind of thing that I think he did really well with the draft this year.
Yeah, and it's about kind of looking at them individually because collectively this draft class isn't going to have a massive impact on the success or struggles of a Bears team this season. But being able to get any contributions from just a group of 5 guys, mostly all towards the end of the draft, I think that you have to sort of when you set the expectations appropriately, you can really see a lot of potential to be able to get more than they bargained for here, even if Denmark is a project who doesn't contribute that much. But there's opportunities for Shelley, Montgomery, Ridley, and even potentially Kareth White, plus the undrafted rookie free agents that might also be able to sneak onto this 53-man roster.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing what and because we only had 5 draft choices, the Bears signed the biggest crop of undrafted free agents I think I've ever seen them sign. I think it was 21 or 22 guys that they signed to round out the 90-man roster after the draft. And there's some interesting names in that group. Alex Bars, an offensive lineman from Notre Dame, who's obviously had some time and miles logged in with Harry Houston. Mathieu Betts, the linebacker from the Canadian school, the number 3 overall pick in the Canadian Football League draft, and he didn't even know. Like, beat writers had to tell him, you got drafted number 3 overall by like Montreal or something. He's like, okay, great. I'll be here in Chicago trying to make this team. So, but he's been making waves. Sam Mustapha, another offensive lineman from Notre Dame, Dax Raymond, the tight end from Utah State. And, and that's just the tip of the iceberg out of the 20 or so guys that we did sign. It's going to be tough to find who to keep, who to let go, and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be an interesting, cut day for Ryan Pace and company. Yeah,
and that's always a good problem to have.
Yes.
It seems like in the old days, the 2010s, that decade, when we'd be talking about 53-man roster projections, it was never an issue of like having too many great players and trying to figure out who to cut. It was kind of just like, okay, where do you want to keep more bodies, because you're going to need more bodies at that position because you don't know if any of them are going to be any good. So it's a great luxury to have a lot of, you see a lot of that young depth coming in the secondary in particular with Denmark, and then 2 undrafted free agent cornerbacks and another safety. And I think they had a couple more at rookie mini camps and stuff. So you can kind of see between that and the 4 undrafted free agent tight ends where the Bears wanted to add some young talent and kind of hope that 1 or 2 guys are maybe even able to arise from those groups. But it's going to be an exciting kind of class to see at training camp, because even as you get to the 3rd team, there's guys here to be excited about. It's not just some no-name third-year veteran that can't stick on a roster. There's some real intriguing third-string bench guys in Chicago, which it's not Dane Sandenbacher and Matt Blanchard anymore. It's some real football players.
Yeah, and I think that will probably make the preseason a bit more intriguing for me this year, because a lot of times you sit down and you watch the preseason, the starters come out there, they play a handful of plays, they go sit down, then it's time for the guys that are trying to make the team to go out and make their case and everything. We know that this roster, for the most part, is set. I would think maybe we've got about 8 spots for the other 40 or so players that are playing for a spot right now. And watching them battle for those spots, I think, could make the preseason pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun, just gives you some kind of stakes for that second quarters and third and second half and all the different opportunities to see these guys, because there's still a few of those guys that just have absolutely zero shot, but there's enough intrigue, I think, at the bottom of the depth chart at enough positions that it's like you don't know who all your backup offensive linemen are going to be, and you don't know exactly who your 5/6 wide receivers are going to be, and you don't know who your number 4 running back, if there's going to be a number 4, and how many tight ends, and in the back of the cornerback group, you had like all your positions have your top guys. Obviously your starting lineup is set, and then your top backups are pretty much set. But like you said, even if it's only 7 or 8 spots, those 7 or 8 spots have a handful of guys for each one that are all going to make some impact here in the preseason.
Yeah, and there always seems like Ryan Pace has had a gift to find those guys that are just going to absolutely jump out at you during the preseason. I mean, a couple of years ago, it was Jordan Howard. Like, man, he was running way better than anybody in the preseason. Then the year after that, it was Tariq Cohen. Like, man, look at this kid go. And then, there's always a player that kind of sticks out that you didn't expect to see anything from, and he becomes kind of the star of the preseason. Those guys don't always make the team. Like last year, it was Javon Wims that was kind of like the superstar of preseason and the one that made like the biggest impact and such. But on the days that, if he was active, he didn't play very much, if at all, last season. So, but that's a guy that's been, trying to get his job, keep a job this year. Which is crazy to say with how well he performed when he had a chance, but that is it's like an embarrassment of riches as far as who we're going to keep. And like you said, how many do we keep? Do we go light on running backs to keep an extra receiver, or do we only carry 3 tight ends to keep an extra running back and things like that? It's going to be very interesting to see how Ryan Pace puts this team together.
Yeah, and the disadvantage for a lot of those young guys is just, that they're unknown and that they are young. And even if they're intriguing and exciting, it's a lot easier to stash somebody like that on the practice squad than, say, Javon Wims, who at least came on in week 16 and 17 last year and kind of showed the rest of the NFL that he could at least catch some balls and make some plays. Whereas, if it's Emmanuel Hall, for example, then even if he outplays, Wims or Marvin Hall in the preseason, you can't stash Marvin Hall in the practice squad, and Wims likely get picked up by another team. So there's dynamics that go into this even outside of just on-field performance when you talk about roster construction.
Right. So looking forward to, before we get into the schedule here, kind of looking at some of the storylines. I mean, obviously there are some that are just as clear as the nose on your face, and Trubisky being chief among them. Will he progress? Will he continue to progress? I mean, everything in OTAs is sunshine and rainbows, but what I'm hearing out of OTAs, I think, is definitely promising. Like those beat writers that you talked about before, Trubisky's definitely taken a step forward. They absolutely loved David Montgomery. That was the other thing that I was mentioning before, was that, and I listened to the Adam Hogan and John's podcast, and these are guys that get to go to OTA practices and such, and he's saying that the way that he pops in plays, and granted there are no pads or anything like that, so there's a lot missing there, but he kind of jumps off the page at you the way that kind of Tariq Cohen did, or other guys in the past that kind of, perked your eyes up in these practices to make you think that we might have something here. He and Riley Ridley and Duke Shelley right off the bat in those OTA practices are guys making marks early on. Yeah,
and like you kind of said, you don't want to put too much stock into it, but at the same time, it's an important box to check.
Right.
That these players, if they're going to be, talented early contributing rookies, then they should be standing out. And I think, if there was somebody who, even if the reports weren't negative, but they just weren't positive either, and it was just sort of like, we didn't hear much about, even Cordero Patterson, for example. I mean, Patterson's an established veteran, kind of know what you're going to get, but those kind of guys, maybe Kareth White Jr. It's not fair to just totally say, well, we didn't hear anything about this 7th round pick, so he's no good. But if it wasn't, there's not really a great example on this team right now. But it's an important box to check, and it'd be notable more so if they weren't checking it and weren't standing out, at least physically, in these types of non-game situations where, in theory, if you're a top athlete and a ready to contribute rookie, you should be able to look natural when there's no pressure and no tackling, and you don't have to know every intricacy of the offense just yet.
Right, and I think out of those three guys, I find it more intriguing that Duke Shelley is making quote-unquote headlines, if you will, because OTAs, there's no contact, there's no tackling, so as far as highlights, it's going to be very heavy on the offensive side. As far, we're not tackling the running back, we're just doing like two-hand touch kind of thing and so on. But to hear that a defensive guy like Duke Shelley is all over the place and he's already making an argument to crack the lineup coming out of OTAs and everything, I thought was very impressive.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection of the type of human beings that Ryan Pace tends to pick in the draft and even in free agency to some extent. But, the types of football players, the guys who give 100% at practice and the guys who are, natural football players, kind of like we were talking about, the guys that have sort of that character and can come in and work harder than anybody else, and all of those sort of, a lot of them ultimately end up being cliches, but you can tell when they're true and when they're not true. And it seems like with at least those three guys that have stood out in OTAs, you can really see evidence of who they are as players and people.
Right. So going back to what I mentioned initially, the progress of Mitch Trubisky, it's not so much that people are saying he's made progress. It's kind of almost like how they're saying it, like the words that they're using, and that he's definitely like what was it that Nagy kept saying, it was all 101 last year. Well, we're definitely 200 level for sure. Now he the way that he's controlling the offense and the choices that he's making, so on and so forth. It's what they're saying, not so much that they're saying something, because obviously they have to tell us something. But it's interesting. But did you ever think that we would ever go into a season in the last several years since he's been on the team where when we talk about the offensive line, Kyle Long is the biggest question mark on it?
Yeah, it's a weird feeling, but at least to some extent, the questions are not necessarily can Kyle Long play at a high level, but just can he stay on the field, right? So I mean, it's a luxury to kind of be at that position where, okay, the former Pro Bowler, or the veteran leader of that position group is the one that we're just not totally 100% sure you can rely on. But when he's healthy, when he's on the field, you know what you're getting there, and you're pretty solid at that position. But it is a very legitimate question of, okay, how much and how many games are we going to get from Kyle Long?
Yeah, because we only got about 8 out of him last year, and I think that includes the playoff game. And, obviously the year 2017, 2016, both years were cut short by various other injuries as well. And, I mean, clearly, I still believe he's the best offensive lineman that we got, but that doesn't do us any good when he's on the sidelines for 8 games with a boot on his broken foot or anything like that. So it's almost a good thing that the injury happened when it did, so he was healthy at the end of the season. Therefore, there's no rehab or surgery or cleanup or anything that needed to be done during the offseason. He was able to actually have a full-blown offseason as a healthy player for the first time since maybe 2015.
Yeah, which is an issue. That's a whole other issue, but you're right 100% that the timing of that compared to, Trey Burton and even Eddie Jackson and now I guess Emmanuel Hall, not exactly the same, but Kyle Long finally a little bit more on the fortunate side. If he's going to get injured, that was the best way to do it.
As far as 2019 is concerned, yes. I think that as far as this season is concerned, it was better that he was hurt in season, healthy at the end of it, so that he could go through a regular off season as opposed to having to take a trip to Birmingham, Alabama to have Andrews put his shoulder back together for him or anything like that. He was able to go through a regular off season, which he hadn't been able to do since about his second or third year in the league. So as far as 2019 goes, I think the timing of that injury was best for this, for this season. So, looking at this team, Lorin, that's your name. Lorin, there it is. I had like 4 different names just flood into my head all of a sudden. It's like, and none of those are right. But looking at this team, we've talked a lot about the offense, and I think the biggest question mark on the offense, is the offensive line, and can it stay healthy? And if we can't, the depth that we have behind it. I think that's the biggest worry spot on the offense, because I think we're good at the skill positions. Tight end, kind of a little worrisome. Trey Burton coming back, still waiting for Adam Shaheen to appear. What's going to be the role of offensive lineman?
Bradley Soul.
Thank you, Bradley Soul. What the hell is wrong with me today? Good God, I did not eat my Wheaties, and I don't know that's what the problem is. But Bradley Soul switching to tight end. How significant is that? Is that just going to be another like goal line type guy, or are they literally going to try to make that guy a tight end? And then, like you said, the 4 undrafted tight ends that we signed, will any of them make the team? So looking at the offense, kind of run down what you think some of the bigger concerns are, storylines that we need to keep an eye on, position battles, that kind of thing. Yeah,
concerns are almost too strong of a word for any of the positions. I think it is more, there's depth and, injury concern maybe at offensive line, but concern is relatively small. It's just more a storyline and something to keep an eye on. And same with tight end. It's like, it's something to keep an eye on, but there's a very clear path to things being just fine, and in all likelihood they will be just fine. So it's the running back rotation where it's not a concern. It's just a question of, how is that going to play out? Will David Montgomery be the lead back by week 1, or will Mike Davis start with kind of the majority of the carries, and then as David Montgomery gets going, how will that transition go, and where will Tariq Cohen plug in as far as how often he's going to be in the backfield this year compared to last year? And at wide receiver, it's just, how are you going to find enough passes to go around all these guys? Robinson, Gabriel, Miller, Ridley are all going to have offensive roles. Patterson is going to be more of a jack of all trades here. So then does Javon Wims spend a whole other season on the bench? Does Marvin Hall even have a place on the roster? And are we going to see, does that mean fewer snaps for Allen Robinson if you're going to get 4 wide receivers in the offense, or fewer snaps for Taylor Gabriel? Then Anthony Miller, you want him to play more than he did last year, and he'll be healthier in theory. So it's a lot of good problems. It's not a lot of like serious issues. It's a lot of like, okay, we have so many good players that we have to decide through. How are we as a coaching staff gonna be able to figure that out and best maximize the guys that we do have, because there's a lot to go around.
Yeah, and just looking at the team in general, I think more question marks surround the offense, because between the two units, offense and defense, obviously the offense has a lot more room for improvement. It's not going to be very easy to do better than the number one defense in the league for a second time. I mean, repeating that is going to be very, very difficult, but I don't think anyone has an issue about what the Bears are capable of on the defensive side. On the offensive side, however, it starts with Mitch and whether or not he will progress. Will he be able to hit some of those throws that he keeps missing or kept missing, but yet somehow he's one of the more clutch guys in the fourth quarter kind of thing. So let's talk about Mitch for a second. I mean, a friend of mine, his name is Brett Coleman, does these videos on YouTube, and Mitch Trubisky is going to be the subject of his next one. That's what he's been saying on Twitter. And his comments about Trubisky as he goes through the tape have been all over the place, whether like, man, this guy, is really dialed in the fourth quarter. And then there's some times where he's sitting there and maybe you thought it was a footwork thing, but no, his footwork is fine. And yet somehow he missed a wide open Anthony Miller kind of thing. It was like looking at 2018, he was absolutely all over the place at times. He didn't really have any kind of consistency that he put together. And yet he still made enough strides for me, on the other hand, to be a believer that he is on the right path to be successful in 2019. Where do you kind of sit on Mitch right now?
It's the ultimate unknown, right? So I'm trying not to be too. I don't want to just hedge the whole thing, but also I don't want to be too definitive about it either, because no one really knows at this point what exactly is going to happen. But to me, I think you're never going to completely iron out all the inconsistencies, and I think being able to be more confident in the offense and in his connection with his receivers, kind of having a whole year with everybody, not only the system, but the players themselves. That, and also, a full offseason of Allen Robinson not being sidelined with injury, and a full offseason with Anthony Miller not coming in just after the draft and having to learn his offense there as well. I think that will be able to mitigate some of the inconsistency. Like I said, you quarterbacks don't usually just magically fix footwork issues to just be completely normal. They improve, but they're not just going to completely go away. But we see, for the most part, a decent decision making, average to above average decision making. Obviously, the arm is fine, and the mobility is great, and we're seeing that pocket presence get better. But I think we saw the steady improvement from last season, and I think I would just kind of project a similar trend this season. I don't know that he's necessarily going to make this MVP level jump, but I think he'll start close to kind of where he was last year and sort of progress, I think, at a similar rate to last year. So by the end of the season, you're getting much more higher level quarterback play, but it's not necessarily this elite quarterback play, but it's good enough quarterback play to help you win some football games.
Yeah, and the thing that I've always kind of noticed about Mitch is that aside from his trouble with inconsistencies, he's not really a guy that's going to make the same mistake twice. He doesn't really come across as somebody kind of like a Jay Cutler who's going to keep throwing it to the same guy over and over again, despite how he's being covered, just because that's where I want to go with the ball. And Mitch just seems like the kind of guy that is learning from his mistakes, so that he will make that mistake less and less until he's not making it anymore, kind of thing. And that's what detailed the progress that he had last season. He was much better at the end of it than he was at the start of it. That last drive against the Eagles before the missed field goal, I think, being a perfect example. That is exactly what we needed from him in that moment, and he put us in a spot to give us a chance to win the game. Would he have been able to do that in the beginning of 2018? I don't think so.
Yeah, and even within that game, you kind of see the both sides of Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, the finish was phenomenal, but I think in the first half there were 2 or 3 dropped interceptions, one in the end zone and one dump off to Jordan Howard, and just bad throws that, had they gone the other way, would have really drastically changed the outcome of the game. But at the same time, in the most important moments, in some of the best quarterback play we saw from Trubisky, probably outside of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game all season.
Right.
I mean, that's that's what gives you the optimism and the hope and sort of the projecting forward. But at the same time, you also see people that are against Mitchell Trubisky kind of point to, well, yes, that was one good drive at the end of the game, but there were also, these X examples of earlier in the game when he wasn't at that level. So how often are you going to get that last drive of the game, Mitchell Trubisky? And the fact that you're seeing it and that those flashes seem to be more frequent and even higher quality as the season goes on, at least shows you that we're going in the right direction here.
Yeah, and the other thing was I kind of felt like that game against Philly encapsulated his season. He had those wild inconsistencies, he had the bad throws, and then in the second half he was lasered in and he was better than Nick Foles. As far like statistically, he was better than Foles, and in with that drive there at the end, he answered Nick Foles because Foles drove his team down, got him in the end zone to put him ahead. Mitch came right back against Magic Man and was able to put us in a position to win the game. And unfortunately, we were employing Cody Parkey at the time, so that's why it didn't work out. But it just I felt like that game itself kind of encapsulated the year in review for Trubisky.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And I know we weren't gonna try and go back over too much, so I don't want to belabor it too much. But I think I'm with you there 100%. There's very much a microcosm of the year.
Yeah. So now we switch over and we look at the defense, and as we mentioned before, a lot fewer question marks on this side, but it was the side of the ball where we had some holes to fill, if you will. Not big holes, but holes nonetheless. Replacing Amos, replacing Bryce Callahan. We talked about who we brought in there. We have the new defensive coordinator and in Chuck Pagano, but he and Vic Fangio kind of learned in the same place, so the differences aren't going to be that much. If anything, we're going to be a bit more aggressive than Fangio liked to be with blitzing and things like that under Pagano. This is a unit that's just ready to go as far as I'm concerned. It's like Khalil Mack, full off season, because he had no off season, literally none last year. No OTAs, no training camp, no nothing. The Bears signed and traded for him. He's on the field 8 days later against Green Bay. Same thing with Roquan Smith. No holdout over contract language for God knows how many days before he finally gets, on the field. Did he play at all in the preseason last year?
Khalil Mack?
No, Roquan
Smith. No, he didn't.
Because I know that he signed like right before we played Denver, so he didn't play that game. And nobody played, nobody of note anyway, played in the Kansas City game. But I was like, I don't think he played at all in the preseason.
No, his first snaps were Green Bay.
Yeah, and his very first snap was a sack on Aaron Rodgers, so that was interesting.
He'd been waiting a little bit for that one.
Yeah, he kind of came in kind of hot on that one. Speaking of which, just to kind of go off the rails a little bit, have you seen that video of Luke Kuechly with that kid in like the little football camp? Have you seen that?
Him down after he moved.
Oh, yeah, so funny. So funny. He came in hot on that second one. Saw that kid's life flash before his eyes before Kuechly came in there and got him. I just thought that was hilarious. So anyway, but yeah, so I mean, looking at the defensive side, beside from the transition from one coordinator to the other, do you have any, big concerns or anything with the defensive side of the ball outside of because I honestly only think that the only thing that can hurt this defense is injuries. Aside from that, I think if everybody's healthy like they were for the majority of last season, this unit's ready to roll.
The only thing, again, I won't use the word concern, but it's just more the question mark or the storyline for me is the exact dynamic with Eddie Jackson and HaHa Clinton Dix.
Sure.
And not that I don't necessarily envision like a bad scenario, but it's just how will they both be used, given they're both similar style safeties. They're both at their best when they're in the deep half or deep middle of the field and kind of being able to see the whole play in front of them and read the quarterback's eyes and use their range to just attack sort of almost, I guess, downhill for the most part when things are happening in front of them. And you can't just play two deep safeties coverages on every single snap. You need to have, a lot of times they'll bring somebody up in the box to at least show numbers for the running game. And, Adrian Amos, especially in this defense last year, playing a lot more underneath coverage. So if Chuck Pagano wants to just do, as much the same as Vic Fangio did, then one of those two safeties will have to play a little bit more of that underneath coverage than perhaps they're used to and perhaps they're best suited for. So it's not, again, not, I wouldn't say it's a concern. It's not going to derail this defense or anything, but it's a question mark that still needs to be answered and will likely kind of have varying answers throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think the other big question mark is I think Leonard Floyd and or whoever the other guy on the other side of Khalil Mack is going to be. Will they be able to bring enough to the table so that Khalil Mack can still be Khalil Mack? I mean, he's one of those special players that he's going to do that regardless, but is the guy on the other side going to make it any easier for him?
Yeah, and some of that can be Chuck Pagano doing different things to create different matchups for his pass rushers. And one of the things that he does is, shifting guys a lot pre-snap after the offense gets into their protections and kind of makes their calls. Depending on how many seconds left on the play clock, they'll make a shift at the last minute and the defensive line will move over and the linebackers will rotate or for whatever reason and just try and throw different looks at the offense. So, can Chuck Pagano do those kind of things if they're not getting enough pass rush from other pass rushers individually? That's sort of one of those kind of changes from Vic Fangio that maybe we could see more creativity in that regard.
Yeah, so like we said before, the offense definitely is a unit that has room for improvement, especially statistically, because I don't think they ranked very high last year, maybe middle of the road at best.
I think they were just slightly below.
Yeah, like 19 or something like that, maybe 18, 19, something like that.
Around there.
Yeah, and then, depending on who you talk to, the number one defense in the NFL, or at least the top two, top three unit, that's going to be difficult to duplicate. But we have the horses in place to make it possible. So, not a lot of, you hate to use the word concerns, but not a lot of concerns on the defensive side or possibilities as there would be on the offensive side. So,
and special.
Well, I was going to say briefly about special teams. What do you think about the kicker situation? John Fox, that idiot, went on ESPN and told the world that the Bears had the worst offseason in football because we haven't solved the kicker problem, even though he was part of the regime that fired the kicker that we had at the time. But, obviously we're 3 years later, so it's not all his fault that we still haven't figured it out. But because we don't have a kicker yet, or we don't know who it is or who it's going to be, John Fox thinks we had the worst offseason in football. It's still a lingering question going into training camp, arguably the biggest question going into training camp. Who is the kicker going to be, just because it was our downfall in 2018?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know that we're going to see a consistent kicking option come out of training camp, and maybe not even the preseason. I would expect another kicker to come to Chicago at some point before the regular season starts. And even then, I'm not confident that they're going to find somebody who's super, super solid for all 17 games or all 17 weeks, 16 games. But at the same time, I'm not overly concerned that the kicker would derail at least their regular season success. That even, even in the seasons, even Cody Parkey last year with the missed field goals he had and missed extra points, the Bears still went 12-4. And even I think back to the season they cut Robbie Gould and they had Connor Barth and Roberto Aguayo came through and Cairo Santos and Mike Nugent finished it out. As much as the kicker was an issue there and they couldn't hit field goals to save their life, that wasn't the reason they were 3-13 or 5-11, whatever they were that year. It was not because they couldn't hit field goals. There were a lot of other issues. So, the amount of impact the kicker has on the final regular season win-loss total, and if this offense and defense are playing at the level that they are expected to, I don't think a bad kicker is going to derail anything that way. But the question becomes, if you get to the end of a playoff game when you need a game-winning field goal, we're right back to kind of where we started in January.
Right, I agree with you. I think as far as the regular season is concerned, the impact that the kicker is going to have might help or hurt with covering the spread or something like that, as opposed to wins and losses for the Bears. That Lions game at home being a perfect example. The Bears won that game going away, and if Parkey hits the field goals that he doinked off the uprights, we add like another 11 points to the total. So instead of it being like 30-22, it's more like 42-22 in that game against Detroit. It made the game look closer than it actually was because Parkey had the day that he did.
Yeah, exactly. It's not it just doesn't move the needle until it really moves the needle.
Right, exactly. It's not a problem until it's a problem. So but it's the thing that it's an old problem. So therefore, it would be kind of looked upon as a lingering one. So even if whoever the kicker is comes out and misses a kick week 1 against Green Bay, it's going to be here we go again. Not like, oh wow, the Bears have trouble with the kicker.
Yeah, and if the Bears miss a kick against Green Bay in week 1 and lose the game, the storyline will be, Cody Parkey 2.0 or whatever, but it probably should be, well, what else did they not do to win or to not win that game, or what else, what else went wrong to the point of where you had to rely on that kicker again in that game? Because that's, again, I think what we come back to with the Eagles game as well.
I was just going to say that. I think in all fairness to Cody Parkey, he missed the kick that we needed him to make, but it's not his fault that we lost the game. There were other opportunities the Bears had in the game to win. To me, I don't really even look at the missing the 2-pointer or anything like that. What made me absolutely sick to my stomach when I looked at the stats for that game were that the Bears had those 3 penalties on that touchdown drive for Philadelphia. And we had 3 penalties for the game. Those were the only penalties we had the entire game, and it ended up being, that touchdown drive. We basically gifted it to them there in the third quarters. Like that to me is why we lost the game, because we got sloppy on defense for that one drive. Amos with the bad hit that extended the drive, and the pass interference on Amukamara and stuff like that. That's where I think the most damage was done in that game.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can point to there, and Cody Parkey just happened to be the last one.
Yeah, because he made oh God, and then he went on the Today Show. Don't even get me started. Anyway, looking ahead to 2019, we briefly touched upon how the season starts, and what a poetic way for it to kick off not only the 100th season of Chicago Bear football, but 100 years of the NFL, with Thursday night at home against the Green Bay Packers. And as much as I love the fact the Bears are starting at home, I think it would have been more poetic to start in Lambeau, just because that's the more, storied stadium, if you will. I mean, Soldier Field's been around, I think, just as long as Lambeau Field, but not this not this Soldier Field. The one with the columns and, the one that they won the Super Bowl in '85, I think would probably be a more appropriate setting for this game.
Well, and Lambeau's gotten some upgrades too. So
true.
It feels even more modern, I think, in Lambeau than it does in Soldier Field. But regardless, the important thing is that it's these two teams on the first game, Thursday night, prime time, rematch of last year's Week 1 with the miraculous Aaron Rodgers comeback, and of course the Bears coming off of having the last laugh last season. Now you get to start in prime time at home. I mean, it was rumored for a little while leading up to it, but it's just too perfect to have not started the season, the 100th season, with these two teams in that situation on that day, with everything leading up to it, following the 100-year celebration and all that stuff. It's straight out of a movie, I think.
I agree. I think there was no better way that the NFL could have done this than to start with, two of the oldest franchises, if not the oldest franchises still in existence anyway, and to start there in Chicago with Green Bay, and on Thursday night with the whole world watching. I can't wait to see it. Then we get to see Vic Fangio up close and personal in Denver, week number 2. That should be interesting. I don't really know what to think about the Broncos. Obviously we think that there's going to be a little more oomph to the defense because of the guy that's going to be running it. But like you mentioned before, we got Flacco. Will Philip Lindsay be ready to go by week 2 with the injury that he suffered with the ACL and everything? Will he even be playing in this game against Chicago? There are a lot more question marks on the offensive side of the ball for them than on defense by a long shot. So I don't know if this is going to be the contest that people want it to be, considering the versus matchup we got going on.
Yeah, you wonder if maybe Vic Fangio will have a better idea of the Bears' offensive strengths and weaknesses and be able to attack that a little bit more than maybe we think. But at the same time, the Bears' offense will be able to pretty well know what they're going up against with the Broncos' defense. And I would trust the Bears offense against the Broncos defense a little bit more than I would trust the Broncos offense against this Bears defense. That one seems like I'm not gonna say an easy one for Chicago, but compared to some of the other opponents on the schedule, this is a lower concern.
Correct. Then we got our second national TV game, Monday night, Week 3 at the Redskins, and I think the more intriguing storyline there is who the quarterback is going to be. Will it be Haskins? Will it still be Case Keenum? That kind of thing. Will Jay Gruden still have a job? Because it's kind of up in the air with Gruden in Washington, especially according to my Washington guy that I had on the show. So then Week 4, against a home game against the Vikings, and this is a special uniform game. I don't know if it's the first one with the throwbacks or the first one wearing the orange jerseys. You know how I feel about that. That's the only way I'm talking about it. But it's an early matchup between the Vikings, because at first, we had Green Bay last year, and then we didn't play another division game till Week 10 or something last season. And we got Week 4 now with Minnesota coming to Chicago.
Yeah, and the Vikings are one of those teams that it's just and after how disappointing they were last year, are they gonna be able to bounce back to some level of contending for the division, or are they just gonna stick down kind of where they were and be that sort of habitually underachieving team? But I still come back to sort of the development of their offensive line and the way that this Bears defense can chew on that. I mean, Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, I was combining their names there. And they're going to do some damage. They're always going to do some damage, and that Vikings defense is always going to give you some trouble. But anytime you put an offensive line in progress in front of Khalil Mack, things don't usually go well for that offensive line in progress.
Agreed. I mean, I just had my Vikings guy on the show. That was the last show before this one, and I did ask him about Week 17. I was like, seriously, bro, what happened on Week 17? Because this was a team that was playing for its season. It's playing to go to the playoffs, and this was a home game where the Vikings always win against the Bears regardless of the way the teams are playing. Minnesota always wins in Minnesota. Chicago always wins in Chicago with this rivalry anyway. And it was almost like the Vikings never showed up. And then, like you mentioned, the offensive line, when the game was no longer in question, we're up 2 touchdowns, 5 minutes to go, Maggie starts emptying the benches, and Isaiah Irving and Kylie Fitz are teeing off on this starting offensive line and, knocking Kirk Cousins around. It's like, dude, this is how you're going to finish the season, getting banged around by our second and third team guys. The offensive line was a huge problem for them, and it's his biggest concern going into 2019.
And you wonder if any of that will linger for the Vikings. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a real storyline, but maybe once you get to Week 4, if some of that pops back up of just how – I mean, embarrassing might be a strong word, but just like you said, the Bears kind of doing whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And that should be embarrassing for the Vikings. But I don't know. I guess maybe just from my perspective, I didn't get that impression that it was, even though it probably should have been. But does that pop back up and make this a little bit more heated than it would be otherwise? We'll see. It'll be fun either way.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because it's not like the offense took advantage and just kept running up the score and putting points on the board. Instead, it was just like, if you're going to pass, we're going to rush you, and it's up to your offensive line to protect you, and they can't. So it's not like the Bears are doing anything outlandish or, getting crazy with the tackles or bragging in anybody's face or anything like that. They were just flat out kicking their ass in the fourth quarter when the game was already over. So it's interesting how they might look at that if they use that as a resource to kind of motivate themselves for that first matchup, week number 4. So week 5 is interesting because and I'm disappointed that this one is in the UK. I really wanted to see how Khalil Mack would be received in Oakland. Like, would they treat him like a villain? Because he never really wanted to leave Oakland. He just wanted to get paid in Oakland, and instead John Gruden ships him away, and they begin this rebuilding thing. I really wanted to see how he would be received. Would he get an ovation? Would they boo him for leaving or anything like that? But instead, we have to go across the pond and see the Bears and the Raiders in Tottenham Stadium. I've been coached on how to say that. And it's actually also, intriguingly enough, the first noon game of the season. It's like Green Bay is obviously Thursday night. Denver is a 3 o'clock game. Washington's Monday night. And then I think even Minnesota is like a 3 o'clock game on CBS or something like that. So we don't play a noon regular kickoff game until week 5, but we're across the pond in the UK playing against the Raiders.
And I agree about the intrigue with Mac there. I'd like to think he would get. I think Raiders fans are smart enough to. I get the impression from Raiders fans that they're not worshiping John Gruden or anything just yet. They were a little bit more upset about Gruden trading Mac than Mac holding out in the first place. So I think he would have done well there. But I don't know that Oakland stands much of a chance based on what we've seen from them and what we've seen from the Bears, whether it's in Oakland or England.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be Bears land.
Yeah, sure. Well, please, man. My UK listeners are absolutely going crazy over themselves. Trying to get tickets to the game because the Bears are actually coming to town, but it's the Bears are going to travel well. They do in pretty much anywhere in the world that they go, but I think we're going to see a lot more blue and orange than we will be seeing silver and black out there in the UK. So. Another early bye week, week 6 this year instead of week 5 from a year ago. And then those first 3 games coming off the bye, 2 of them are at home, but those are 3 tough football games. We got the Saints at home, the Chargers at home, and then on the road for our quote-unquote revenge game with Philly. We're not going to have time to mess around with the bye. We got to come out guns blazing right after the break.
Yeah, a quick recovery from England, which is why the bye week needs to be right there. But it is an interesting dynamic that, when you start out with Denver, Washington, and Oakland in those first 5 games, you can kind of more or less pencil those in as W's, and you'll get at least one, in theory, from Green Bay and Minnesota. So you could be 4-1 going into that bye week. But then you come out against 3 playoff teams, 3, second round and beyond playoff teams, Saints, Chargers, Eagles. I mean, that's the kind of stretch that will tell you how good this Bears team actually is. That's when you will be truly answering the quote unquote regression question, especially when you talk about week 9 in Philadelphia, the rematch of the Cody Parkey game, how that one plays out. I know it's not Nick Foles this time, it's Carson Wentz, and Eddie Jackson in theory will be playing and Trey Burton as well. So there's going to be differences, but you will know after that stretch if the Bears are a Super Bowl contender versus maybe just an NFC North contender, or where exactly they kind of fall with some of the best of the best. Because you can even expand it 2 more games and have the Rams once again, and that's murderer's row.
Yeah, it's because those 3 games coming off the bye, that completes the first half of the season. That's where the first 8 games end. There's with Philly week number 9. Then you're home for Detroit, our first matchup, week 10, same as last year, or week 11, one of the two. And then we're at the Rams this time for Sunday Night Football. So a Sunday Night Football rematch, but on their turf instead of ours this time. Home for the Giants, so another revenge game, only we're flopping locations once again, because, God, that's a game I'd love to have back, that Giants game, because 2 of the most fluky interceptions I've ever seen them. The Giants got the ball to bounce their way pretty much the entire football game. Those 2 interceptions, that crazy one that Daniel threw at the start of the game, that one-handed grab that Ogletree made that would have been a touchdown to Tariq Cohen if it gets to him, the wide receiver touchdown pass for the Giants, that where the Bears sell out on that 2-point play and just murder Eli, but he gets it off to a wide open Odell Beckham. And everything that could go right for the Giants did, and that's why a 3-8 team beat an 8-3 team in there. The Bears made their push and sent it to overtime, but in the end, it was just a few too many bounces for the Bears to overcome in that one.
Yeah, so then you move ahead to 2019, and you have the whole Daniel Jones thing, and the Giants really. That's going to be another one of those. Okay. How can Saquon Barkley beat the Bears by himself? Probably not. So as long as you don't have Chase Daniel starting in Chicago, you should be okay there.
Yeah, I think so.
In Detroit, and that's you get a little bit of a break after that post bye week stretch.
Right. So, but the Rams, that's going to be an exciting game to play them in LA. I'm very interested to see how the crowd turns out for that one. Because as we just mentioned a few minutes ago, the Bears are one of the best traveling teams in the league. There are a lot of Bear fans in L.A., and I wonder how much of that Coliseum is going to be blue and orange.
Yeah, there's only so many seats in there too, so
Yeah.
you could a vocal majority of Bears fans there, even if it's 51%.
Yeah,
that can be a home game for sure.
For sure. And then we're at Detroit for Thanksgiving once again. The early 11:30 start. Yay! So another quick 80+ hour turn. Well, I'm hoping that the Giants do suck this year, so the Bears can play at noon, as opposed to getting their game flexed to 7, so they lose 8 hours in that tiny window to get ready for the Thanksgiving game this year. So I hope that game stays right where it's at, and the Bears can get, they're done at 3 instead of starting at 7. I mean, I think that was our biggest concern going into that game, regardless of whether or not Chase Daniel started over Mitch to nurse that shoulder injury or whatever, was like, how's the team going to react to an 83-hour window between games?
Yeah, I don't know who at the NFL office kind of let that whole scheduling thing play out like that, but that to me seems like you could file some kind of grievance for the Bears. Hey, don't let that happen again.
Yeah, that was almost careless that they did it that way.
Player
but
not in favor there.
Right. And then we do the back-to-back Thursday thing. Thursday against the Lions on Thanksgiving, and then come back on Thursday night at home against the Cowboys in our true Thursday night game. Interesting game, because I'm wondering what the Cowboys are going to be this year. I mean, the NFC East traditionally and lately, for the last couple of, almost 2 decades now, they don't repeat champions year after year. It hasn't happened, according to my Eagles guys, since 2004, when the Eagles last did it. 2003, 2004, the last repeat champion in the NFC East. This is week 14. This is the first weekend in December. This is going to be an important football game. Will it be important for Dallas as it will be, or we assume it will be, for the Bears at this time of the year?
Dallas is one of those teams where it just seems like everything that and perhaps because of Jerry Jones wanting it this way, but everything that happens with them just seems to be such a bigger deal than it needs to be.
Right.
So it's like, will this Dak Prescott contract situation be a distraction if that's not figured out by the time they get into that season? And what's going to happen with Zeke Elliott's future contract? And then Jason Witten is coming back in there. There's even things that shouldn't be huge storylines or even be super negative storylines just kind of seem to build up that way. I mean, I think Dallas's defense is still a little bit underrated, but I'm curious to see how Kellen Moore does as their offensive coordinator.
Right.
And, they added some more weapons too. I mean, there's a lot to like about Dallas, but in sort of the way that people don't give the Bears a lot of credit because they haven't sustained success, I think I feel similarly about Dallas. It's like, well, I guess can you prove it? As much as there's a lot to like on paper with them, show it to me one more time and let me see it all really come together with this group, and then I'll give you credit.
Right. Yeah, and I kind of feel that way about Dallas as well. They had that big, huge year in 2016, 13-3, making waves and then lose in the playoffs, and come back 2017 was a disaster. And then last year, they were almost kind of like the default champion, just because Philly had its slow start, the struggle, the Super Bowl hangover, if you will. The team that was in first place for the first half of the year, Washington, loses Alex Smith, and then the injuries just kind of murdered that team. And then the Giants being the Giants, the Cowboys were all that was left. I mean, the Eagles made their run at the end of the year, but it was basically the Cowboys' division to lose once the Washington Redskins kind of went down last year.
And in typical Cowboy fashion, I mean, it never actually, and typical as in recent Cowboys fashion, it just doesn't come together. I mean, it just, they hit the playoffs and, they beat the Seahawks in the first round, but then the Rams kind of reminded everybody of where Dallas was and kind of their limitations from a talent standpoint. And they're just not a team that scares you, even though you can kind of look over the roster and like what you see. Yeah,
definitely. And then the last 3 games of the season for our beloved Chicago Bears, 2 division games and a Super Bowl contender. At Green Bay for Week 15, so that should be interesting. Home for the Sunday night finale, I believe, against the Kansas City Chiefs. And then, stop me if you've heard this before, Lorin, at Minnesota, week number 17. So I know that that might sound familiar considering it's happened 5 times in the last 6 years and 4 years in a row now. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily mind as much playing Minnesota every year if we could, like, swap locations from time to time, but it's in Minnesota, Week 17, no matter what, the last 4 years. So, I mean, there are guys that are going to play their entire 4-year rookie contract with the Bears that end their season in Minnesota every single time. That's crazy.
Yeah, Javon Wims, I'm sure, has that one circled on his calendar for again. He's like, oh, there'll be my opportunity to get back in and get some snaps again for that one by the end of the year. But you wonder, by the time the Bears get to that stretch, if depending on what Green Bay is doing, if that one's got some punches back and forth, and then Kansas City, are they going to have much juice left in the tank for Minnesota? I mean, unless the Bears are truly actually fighting for, whatever their playoff spot, then the intensity will be there. But if they already have the division kind of wrapped up and they're just playing for seeding at that point, and they're just coming off of that big prime time with the Chiefs.
Yeah,
there's I don't know if you could call it a trap game possibility, but there's a possibility for at least a letdown there. Yeah, I can kind of foresee.
Sure. I mean, Week 17 is definitely one of those ones that it's almost like a preseason game, especially for a team that we anticipate the Bears will be in, the spot that they'll be in. Similar to last year, the division's wrapped up, and for the most part, the seeding has been decided because the 49ers were not going to beat the Rams last year. They weren't going to be able to help us out. But, there's not a whole lot for the Bears to play for other than the fact that it's Week 17 and we're legally obligated to play the game. It could be one of those ones where the Vikings sneak out a win just because the Bears are looking ahead to the wild card weekend, God forbid, or even resting up for the bye because we've got home field for the first game at least.
Or the possibility is that the Vikings just completely kind of fall out like they did last year, and we have Isaiah Irvin getting sacks and Javon Wims catching touchdowns.
Yeah, that was such an odd game. I kept waiting for the Vikings to show up, and they had like that little mad dash in the third quarter where they got it down to like a 3-point lead, but the Bears came right back the very next drive, put a touchdown on the board, and that was it after that. So the Vikings shot their shot, and that was it after that. It was like the Bears controlled virtually the rest of the game. And I knew it wasn't a good sign when Jordan Howard, who hadn't had a big run all year, breaks one on the opening drive. It's like, this is not going to go well for Minnesota today.
Yeah, you could kind of see the two different classes of the NFC North really take physical form.
Yeah. It was interesting. So let's look at our division real quick before we go here. We've got a lot of intriguing questions about the other teams in the division. I mean, Green Bay, obviously a new head coach. Will he be able to gel, which is what Mike McCarthy was not doing with Aaron Rodgers last year. I mean, I'm sure you read that article that was put out about how, I don't think that Rodgers ran a play that McCarthy called throughout the last year or so that they were together, if not more. He just kept changing the play because he didn't like it, kind of thing. Will that carry over into this relationship with Matt LaFleur and everything? Will they butt heads or will they work together, and how will that affect the team? The Vikings, like we talked about a moment ago, can Kirk, because it kind of falls on Kirk Cousins. It was a stigma that carried with him in Washington, but they were the Redskins, so they kind of sucked anyway. So big deal if they can't beat the better teams. They're not a very good football team to begin with. He was supposed to be the missing piece in Minnesota that's going to take them from losing the NFC Championship game to winning the Super Bowl, and he was anything but. He didn't answer the call in any of the big games the Vikings were playing in last year.
It just kind of leaves the Bears as the team with the least question marks.
Yeah.
Not that Green Bay can't just storm out and be this dominant offense with Aaron Rodgers at his peak again, and then they take the division, or Minnesota puts it all together and Kirk Cousins plays like that missing piece and their defense is as good as it was, and they those two teams along with the Bears have a path and a possibility to a lot of success this season and winning the division, but it is the Bears that I think have the easiest path in terms of the fewest obstacles to overcome internally to be able to. I mean, obviously the schedule has its challenges in there as well, but it does. I mean, as the defending NFC North champions with pretty much the same team coming back, it is their division to lose,
right?
Till otherwise noted.
Yeah, I mean, and then when you look at the Lions, it's year 2 under Patricia. They've got a brand new offensive coordinator out there. They lost some guys. Ziggy Ansah is off, and I think it's in Seattle now. They've lost some pieces. They had a fairly decent draft, or at least they believe they did. Anyway, they're happy with the guys that they got and the pieces that they made. But the Lions are the Lions. I mean, they're either going to be good or they're not. They're a boom or bust kind of team. It almost seems like the years that they were successful, nobody really saw it coming. And the years that we expect them to be successful, they're 3-13, 5-11, and drafting in the top 10 of the draft. So I think that you got to watch out for the Lions because they're that team that can sneak up on you. It wouldn't be a surprise if Green Bay or Minnesota reemerged, if you will. But if the Lions were wreaking havoc or whatever, I think that would kind of catch people off guard.
There's always that opportunity, but they're kind of like they feel a little bit like the Bears of the 2010s, the Jake Bears, where it's like you see it there and it's like, oh, if this is the year that Matthew Stafford, puts it all together in his new offensive coordinator, with some of the same reasoning behind that, but their defense has some real question marks, and they're not going to be the worst team in the league, but they might be the worst team in the NFC North again.
Sure. So, but yeah, like I said, you got to keep your eyes on those guys just because you never see them coming the year that they have those successes. Like, well, they've always kind of had talented teams, but never really been able to put it together. And then one year they do, and then the next year they come back down to reality again, kind of thing. So that's what you got to watch for the Lions. And plus, the Lions always play the Bears tough, so it's they could be more of a nuisance than a problem, I guess, for us this year.
You can't sleep on them in any one game, but you can kind of sleep on them for the whole season.
Right. Well put. So there you have it, Lorin. Looking forward to 2019. I mean, I think I've mentioned this to you, and I've said it till I'm blue in the face on this show about how I've been looking forward to 2019 since the start of 2018, just because of all the things you mentioned earlier. It's year number 2 in the system. It's year number 2 with Mitch and all of these new offensive weapons that he has. We got full OTAs and training camps for Khalil Mack and for Roquan Smith. We got guys healthy, like Kyle Long had a healthy offseason as opposed to putting his broken body back together during the offseason and losing most of it just healing up and things like that. There's a lot of things that have, like the arrows pointing up with this team, and I can't wait to see them pull it off this year.
Yeah, there hasn't been, I think, as nearly this much, not only this much optimism, but also justified optimism. And then that is the key difference there. It's not just, Bears are going to go 16-0 every season because they're the best team, but like legitimately, like there is real reason to see this team as a Super Bowl contender. I mean, you see that path. It's not out of the question. There's a fairly direct way to get there, and it's just a matter of everybody performing to the level that we've seen them perform to. And if they do that and they do what they're supposed to do, this will be a special season. Yeah,
sky's definitely the limit with this team, and hopefully the sky takes us to South Florida in February to get a shot at bringing that Lombardi back home. So that would be something else, especially for it to happen this year. It's like the Super Bowl is on Papa Bear's birthday. It's the 34th season since we won a Super Bowl, a.k.a. Walter Payton, that whole numerology thing, and the 100th season of Bears football and all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of like all lining up for this to be the perfect year for the Bears to finally do something.
Yeah, the stars are all aligned, but we'll see where they're pointing to.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm overjoyed, and I'm frightened to the core to watch it all unfold. Is it going to go the way that we want it to? Or are we going to be looking at the end of the season and be like, are you and I going to be talking in January like, dude, what the hell happened? It's like is that the conversation we're going to be happening, or just like, holy crap, dude, we just won the Super Bowl. How awesome is this? Kind of thing. So anything in between there could be possible because it is the NFL. So I can't wait for it to get started. Number one, because I hate summer, and I can't wait for this weather to go away, and just because it's football, and I can't wait for that to get started again.
You can almost smell it in the air. We're getting so much closer, and hopefully the podcast helps us at least get just a little taste of it. A little bit of that oasis in the summer to to get us through, because we're almost there. We've almost made it.
We almost made it, dude. And believe me, these shows that I've been doing have helped me get this far. And I've got a little bit more work to do before we get to the preseason games, and a little more work to do before we get to the regular season, and then we can sit back and relax and just watch it happen. Watch it all happen, I should say. So, yeah, we're almost there. So, but as usual, it's been great having you on once again. We look forward to having you on traditionally during the bye week, which this year is week 6. So that'll be the next time I plan on having you back on. And so we're looking forward to that. Where can we keep up with you in the meantime?
Yeah, you can find all my stuff on Twitter at Cox Sports and the number 1. It's like Fox Sports 1, but with a C. You can hear me on the Locked On Bears podcast and read my Bears work on NBC Sports Chicago and Bears Wire.
And there you have it, Lorin Cox. Thanks so much, man. It's been great, and looking forward to seeing how it all goes down.
Hey, anytime, I'll be watching it just as eagerly as you are.
I bet. Remember, guys, promo code ACAA for $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek, and promo code BEARS100 to get that 50% deposit bonus on my bookie. Want to thank my guest, Lorin Cox. Always have a great time talking Bears with him on the show. Be sure to check out his podcast, Locked On Bears. It's one of the better Bears podcasts out there. Lorin definitely knows his stuff, as we've just proven in our 90-plus minute conversation about our beloved Chicago Bears. And I'm super excited about 2019. I can't wait to watch it all unravel before us, because I really do believe there's just the feeling. And you guys know how I am with my gut feelings. I have a feeling that there's greatness ahead for us this year. I really do feel like we're going to be the happiest ones the day after that first Sunday in February. I really do. I just have a feeling about it that this is going to be that special year that we've all been waiting for. For those of you who've been around since before '85, that this is going to be the time we get to hoist the trophy again. I really do feel that way. So, yeah, even after that conversation with Lorin raising concerns and things like that, I still feel super awesome about this team, and that 2019 is going to go just the way we want it to. I really believe that. So, yeah, call it drinking the Kool-Aid. I just call it, I can't see I can't see it going another way right now. I just can't. So maybe that's rose-colored glasses and I'm being blind to the possibilities or whatever, but I really do think it's all going to work out this year. So anyway, guys, that is going to do it for our opponent preview series. 14 up, 14 down. And now we are in the home stretch of home stretches. The last few weeks before training camps, before training camp starts, before the preseason gets underway. And so for the next 4 weeks, we're going to do one episode a week. We're going to have a special guest on all 4 of those shows. As I said before, Adam Rank will be the first of those next week. I'll be talking to him Monday night. That show will drop first thing Tuesday morning. The following week, we'll have Coach Don Patterson from the University of Iowa and my alma mater, Western Illinois, and he was an assistant at the University of Buffalo when one of our favorite people on earth, Khalil Mack, was there as well. So we might dabble in a few Khalil Mack stories. And then then we have Emory Moorhead is going to be on the show the week of training camp to talk about his experiences in training camp, the differences between now and then across the board as far as the training camp experience is concerned. And then to wrap it up, Carolina Teague from ESPN in San Antonio will be on the show to talk Bears and everything in between as we get ready. That'll be the last show before the preseason starts, and then after that, it'll be preseason review shows until we go headlong into Week 1 preseason, when Evan Western from Acme Packing Company will come back to preview Week 1 on Thursday Night Football between our beloved Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers to kick off not only the 100th season of Chicago Bears football, but 100 seasons of NFL football. I cannot wait. The clock is ticking, and we are getting so close to that day coming by. I mean, it's Thursday as I'm recording this, so we're, 7 weeks from today. So 56 days from today, 55 from when most of you are going to be hearing this, but 56 days from today between the Bears and the Packers getting it on Thursday Night Football in the kickoff game for the 100th season of NFL football. How exciting is that? So definitely looking forward to that. Come on back next week when we talk to Adam Rank. We'll be talking about his show he's going to be doing in Chicago, why he's such a big fantasy football guy, and how is he a California guy that's a Bears fan or a Chicago guy that's an Angels fan? We'll talk about that, and I'll talk about what I mean more when we have Adam on the show. So be sure to come back on Tuesday to hear that, and stick around for our little interview series as we close out the summer and get into the preseason. So thanks so much for tuning into these episodes, guys. I know that some of you aren't very patient with them and you kind of tolerate them, but this is my favorite. These are my favorite shows to do, and I'm super excited that I'm done. And as soon as we're done with these, it's right, you can almost taste it. The season is so close. So be sure to come back on Tuesday when we have Adam Rank on the show. Until then, my name is Larry D, and this has been Bears Talk Underground.